back, my little nightmares. I just stopped recording I just got done with recording the first chapter of the Drarry story. If you saw the video, you know why I'm just, So, but I'm glad that we have a Drarry story. Okay. I can't look at Draco the same anymore. Is he tall in this one? Please tell me he's short. I just need him to be at least less than 6 feet. Right, maybe like 5'11", please. Because in the last one he was tall and something else was tall. Let's not mention what it was. And they talked about it for 50 minutes about his thingy. And I went, stop it! Holy crap. I was just like, no one talks like this with their friends. I don't, conflict loyalties. Let's get to something that's better, maybe. I don't know if it can be better, but I'm not saying that the story's horrible. It's just, I need to cleanse myself. Okay, Kira Dog 234 is the writer. The Golden, oh my word. Okay, that is a long thing. Okay. The Golden Trio have returned for their 8th year at Hogwarts in order to make up for the 7th year lost to the war. Old grudges are being reassessed. Friendships are being tighter than ever, becoming tighter than ever. Harry is looking forward to this year, hoping that it will be different from the rest and free of danger. All he wants is a normal year of school. Yeah, that's you getting in trouble. That's a normal year for you guys, so I don't know what you mean by normal. The year has thrown everything off track for Draco. New feelings have arisen within him. Feelings he kept locked away deep inside for years. Feelings he hoped would go away and has only just begun to let in. His life has been destroyed by the events of the past few years of his life. What will he do in this final year? He never planned to survive the war or to return to Hogwarts ever again. He's conflicted, torn between following the wishes of his parents, who've all but abandoned him, or making his own path and doing as he wants for the first time in his life. Various headcanons will be integrated into this. You have been warned. Credits go to J.K. Rowling. I do not own Harry Potter. Okay, that's nice. That's very sweet of you. I don't know who would think you owned Harry Potter, but, there's people that take it too far. Author's note. This is my first ever attempt at fan fiction. Oh, that's so nice. Hopefully it won't be completely unreadable. I'll be the judge of that, sweetheart. And I'm guessing it's not like the Drarry story, so I think yours is readable. Any tips and criticisms would be much appreciated. Please try to keep it constructive, though. I thought it said conservative. I'm like, oh, I see. But no, it's constructive. There will not be smut in this story, but if any of you really want it, you are free to write it, and I will add it in. I'm not willing to write smut. I'd rather keep my innocence intact for now. I'm going to try and update this story periodically, though I can't promise certain times. I also don't have an exact plot set out yet, but I know where I want this to go, so hopefully you'll enjoy the ride. Okay. Any comments will be read, and I'll try to reply to all of them. Though I do miss notifications sometimes. Same here. I do a lot. I miss notifications from all over, not just here. Thank you for reading, and I hope you enjoy the story. What the fuck was that? Huh? Wait a minute. Hold on. Oh. Don't judge me. I just bought an Otome game. Oh, holy crap. Okay, chapter 1. Let's go on. Harry's POV. Harry stepped onto the train and turned right, looking for an empty compartment. Ron and Hermione hadn't arrived yet. Harry had come from Grimmauld Place after collecting his books and leaving earlier than he normally would. The train was already busy, filled to the brim with excited students eager to begin their year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Harry looked into each compartment he passed, smiling as memories of all the previous years sitting there flashed through his mind. Memories of buying the entire sweet trolley to share with a lanky, ginger-haired boy. Memories of a bushy-haired girl looking for a toad and fixing Harry's glasses. Memories of happiness shared with his two best friends. It all seemed so long ago now. Eventually, he came to a somewhat empty compartment. There was one bag under the seat closest to the window on the left. A bag that Harry immediately recognized, yet could not place. He put his suitcase in the luggage rack and he sat across from the solitary bag. After a while, before the train went into motion, Ron and Hermione walked past, then turned back upon seeing him and came in. "Harry, mate, we were looking for you." Ron practically beamed, a smile etched on his freckled face. Harry stood with a grin, wrapping his friends in hugs. "How are you, Harry?" Hermione asked, hair wild as ever. Well, I guess it's not following the movies. Because she didn't have wild hair in the last years of Hogwarts, did she? If you actually look at her hair. Anyways, fine, thanks, Hermione. I got here early, so I thought I might as well find us a carriage. Harry grinned, sitting again. He noticed with glee that his friends were clasping each other's hands. Finally, he thought to himself as they sat beside him. "Who's that bag belong to?" Ron asked, gesturing towards the suitcase across from Harry. "No clue, mate. Been there since I got here," Harry replied. The bag was made from green leather, patterned with what looked like a snake on its surface. Again, Harry felt as if he should know who it belongs to. He had seen it before. It was definitely someone in his years, a suitcase. The trio made light conversation with one another as the train whistled into motion. Pulling away from the station like a bird taking off from a branch, the comforting rhythm of the train settled over the three, instantly relaxing with his charming familiarity as they caught up. Harry only half listened to as Ron told him and Hermione about the latest Quidditch matches. The Chudley Cannons had won their last match 3-0 and had another at some point later on in the week. He was really thinking about the stupid green leather suitcase. Who did it belong to? Why was it there? No one with it? He frowned down as it even as he nodded along to whatever. Was that from my voice box? That's weird. He frowned down at it even as he nodded along to whatever Ron was saying. He'd been over to the Burrow a few times over the holidays. Each time had been great, though a little awkward after his breakup with Ginny. Ginny? He'd always thought of her as a sister. With her as his girlfriend, he just didn't feel right, so he'd broken it off, much to her disappointment. She had understood, of course she did, and had spoken a couple of times to Harry to prove she didn't hold it against him. Harry hadn't decided yet if he would stay at the Burrow after this year, although he'd been told he could if he wanted to by Mrs. Weasley. The chosen one had spent the majority of his holiday at Grimmauld Place with Sirius and Remus, the power couple of the century, as Sirius had deemed them. The two were inseparable now, scarcely seen without each other. Harry had been surprised at first when they'd told him they were in a relationship, but he supposed it would make a lot of sense as he thought back to Remus's reaction to finding Sirius hadn't murdered Peter, to discovering he was innocent, and the relationship seemed more plausible than ever. Of course, he wasn't really well known for being observant, was he? Oi, Harry mate, are you listening? 11. If you don't know that joke, I'm sorry for your YouTube hasn't watched the countries yelling at a voice recognition elevator, and it's from Scotland. 11. Okay. Anyways, going on. Ron asked, waving his hands in front of a dazed Harry's face. What? Yeah, sorry, just tired, he said, blinking a few times to clear his head. A heartbeat later, the chatter resumed between the three, as enthusiastic as ever. Harry shoved all thoughts from his mind, happy to be back with his friends and focusing on not zoning out again. Minutes later, a flash of movement outside of the compartment caught Harry's eye. A slice of platinum pale hair and eyes just as devoid of color. Malfoy. As Harry looked up, he saw the edges of the Slytherin's rope disappear past the door. Seconds later, he returned, flinging the glass entrance open, with a slender fingered hand. Immediately, Ron and Hermione's chatter stopped. 3 pairs of eyes stared pointed glares at the newcomer. Oh my gosh, no! You're trying to reinvent yourself. Don't be mean, okay? In almost perfect synchronization. Well, if it isn't Potter, Weasel, and Granger, saviors of the wizarding world. Malfoy sneered, voice dripping with sarcasm. His eyes held an almost playful glint, at least. Harry reckoned an emotion different from the aggression he was accustomed to. Shove it, Malfoy. You're not wanted here, Ron snarled, tensing as the pale man looked at them all. It was obvious he was expecting a fight. Nothing nice ever came from Malfoy's presence. He did help me in the war, though. Maybe things will be different. Harry thought to himself, biting back a sharp comment. This year, he was looking for a fresh start. All at once, the fight seemed to evaporate from the blonde, and he slumped into the seat closest to the door, furthest away from the trio. Whatever, Weasel. Everywhere else is full now. Anyway, he spat, kicking the... full now anyway. He spat, kicking the suitcase towards himself, turning his icy gaze to the corridor outside. Harry's eyes widened in surprise. That's it! That's it? No scathing comment? Nothing came? Nothing came. Malfoy sat in silence, robes pulled about him as if he was freezing. Harry looked at his enemy up and down. He was paler than ever, purely skin and bones. His robes were pristine, devoid of creases. Their green edges practically shimmered in their cleanliness. His hair was slicked back in its usual gelled way, but something had definitely changed with the Slytherin prince. He looked almost broken. As if he could feel Harry's gaze upon him, Malfoy turned and directed the frozen glare straight into the emerald pools of Harry's eyes. "What are you looking at, Potter?" came the slowly calculated drawl. Harry thought for a moment, then replied, "Let's put all of this behind us, Malfoy. I don't want to be at each other's throats anymore." Malfoy's eyebrow rose. His expression flickered from neutral to hurt, to longing, and back to its cold, icy stare. "As if, Potter, that can't happen." That was a slight hitch in the blonde's voice that made Harry's heart skip a beat, as he once again sat back, ignoring the looks of surprise on his best friends' faces. He felt more saddened by that reply than he would have thought possible. He glanced back at his enemy, only to see his lip quiver, ever so slightly, hand fidgeting with the edge of his robes. It was a nervous habit. How he knew that, Harry did not know. It frightened him slightly that he knew this, but the chosen one quickly dispersed of that thought and rested his head against the cool glass of the window. The compartment was now so silent that you would hear a pin drop. No conversation had spread between the three since Malfoy's arrival. Harry sighed again, closing his eyes against the glass, savoring in its coolness. Hogwarts wasn't too far away. Hey guys, how's this for a first chapter? Please tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'm surprised this is their first ever fan fiction. Come on. Okay. Nice tappy tone. I can't because I have other apps I need to... My immortal, whatever it's called, won't work anymore. Immortal Diaries. I just downloaded it and it doesn't work. And I'm just pissed off about it. Chapter 2. Trigger warning. Abuse. Okay, so everyone who's triggered by abuse, skip like a couple minutes ahead. Maybe even... I'll say it again and then you can... But here we go. Draco's POV. The Slytherin prince slid into platform 3 9/4. 9 3/4. I'm an idiot. Okay. Wordlessly. Unnoticed by anyone, he'd become adept at keeping to the shadows, but that did not mean he was proud of it. His suitcase was clutched tightly in his left hand, knuckles white with fear. He looked about himself as if he was expecting to be attacked at any moment, as if he was ready to accept this possible attack without protest. Those who knew him would have said he looked different. He had been careful to ensure his clothes were pristine and immaculate, hair gelled back as usual. A Malfoy must always look his best, after all. Inside, between his cool exterior. Draco was broken beyond repair, his spirit snapped and obliterated by the last few years of his pathetic excuse for a life. He had no fight left. Those who had known him would have noticed subtle changes in the blonde. But pretty much everyone who had known him was dead, or worse, in Azkaban. All except for Pansy and Blaze, both whom had, like him, survived through some miracle or another. The difference was in the jittering of his hands, the rabbit in the headlights look into his eyes, the paper-thin complexion of his skin. Draco had noticed these changes, but he doubted others would. No one had really cared about him since he had failed his task. That summer hadn't been uplifting either. Oh no. Who would it have been? Why would it have been? It wasn't like he deserved any happiness. Draco's summer had been far from pleasant, but then again, pleasant wasn't something his life hadn't been in years. Okay. I think this is a warning, so don't skip a couple of minutes ahead, or someone comment down below where you should skip ahead if you're not okay with abuse, because I sense it's coming up soon. It had all been a nightmare since the war. Each day more torturous than the last. After the war, he'd been pulled away by Lucius, a man he now refused to think of as his father. He had looked up to the older man once, a time when he thought everything Lucius did was brilliant. Each word he spoke a sheer blessing, like the treasured speech of some beloved deity. That was until he'd realized that it was all a lot darker than it seemed. Oh boy. Draco had come out to his father, no, Lucius, as a gay long ago, years ago, and had never had a proper conversation with either him or his mother since. At the time, he believed they'd accept him for who he was, even if it did contradict the strict pure blood beliefs. He'd been so sure that his parents would accept him that Draco hadn't even been nervous about telling them. He knew that they loved him more than anything, and was almost certain that this new development wouldn't change their minds toward him in the slightest. Oh, Merlin, how wrong he'd been. Oh, gosh. If he'd known that what would happen next, he would have been considered opening his mouth. It was the summer before 6th year, when Dumbledore was still alive. The Malfoys had been for dinner, silent as always, as usual, in the empty house for the first time in a long while. Draco had been toying with the idea of telling his parents about the newly discovered sexuality for months. He'd only come to the terms with it earlier on in the year. It even excited him slightly. The only problem was he didn't really know how they would take it. Obviously, since he was their son, nothing too bad would happen, right? Wrong. How could he possibly have been so wrong? Draco had planned it, knew what he would say, how he would say it. Needless to say, his plan was completely abandoned and thrown out the window, along with all his other preparations. Instead, he blurted out over the silence. Father, Mother, I have something to tell you. I'm gay. He'd said it so fast he tripped over the words. Malfoys don't stutter. Malfoys think before they speak. Malfoys plan what they are going to say before they say it and stick to the plan. It felt good to finally get the words out, though. Words that had toiled inside him like a waiting storm for so long as he could remember. For the first few seconds, he felt feather light. He felt light as a feather, pretty much. When Lucius' fork dropped with a thunderous clang, and with it, so did Draco's hopes. Oh gosh. Trigger warning right about now. The noise reverberated through the dining hall, straight through Draco as a hesitant smile slid from his face. There was silence, a rising tide of fury boiling from where his father sat. His mother was simply frozen, her lips curled slightly in a mixture of surprise and disgust. She'd always been gifted at hiding her feelings, more so than Lucius had ever been. No words were spoken. There was no movement. The younger Malfoy fought to keep his hands from fidgeting, as he tried with all of his strength not to run from the room right then. You are what? I would have said that was something Goyle told me about, and I was trying to see if my parents would be accepting if his parents would be if I was gay. I would say that. I would be so quick with that. It was just a joke. It was just a joke, man. I'm pulling your leg. Don't hurt me. Literally say I'm kidding or joking. Please say so. Oh gosh. The words were cool, forcefully calm, hiding the eruption of anger, dancing just beneath the surface of Lucius's porcelain face. The question was rhetorical, of course. Draco knew enough not to answer. Lucius had heard him perfectly well. The silence of a few seconds before had been words enough. Then the pain hit. This is where you skip. Everyone who is has a problem with abuse. Can't stand it. Right now, I'm just drinking some water because my head's starting to hurt. Where's my Advil? I'll give you a second to skip, because I know it takes me a while to skip sometimes. Give me 2. Son of a bitch. Okay. There we go. Okay, people have wanted to skip. Okay, here we go. The words were cool. Nothing had been said, though he could have sworn he'd seen his father's lips move, ever so subtly, his wand hand flickering. Oh, so imperviable under the table. Crucio! Pain flared through Draco as if he was being set. Oh, by the way, what I mean, triggered and stuff like that. I can't hear it. It hurts me so much. That's what I mean. But I don't condone violence against children. I'm just saying that. I'm just saying this is the story. This is how it's going. And I don't want a lot of people to be triggered, because that's just rude. Pain flared through Draco as if he was being set alight. His skin burned in front of his eyes, everywhere seared across his body. The white-hot agony that made his limbs feel laden made him drop from the chair, fall to the floor with a thud. The edges of his vision turned black. His entire body convulsed with pain of the curse. It seemed endless. He lay there for what felt like hours, screaming until his throat felt raw, tears streaming from his eyes. Burning from within, lashed with 1,000 whips at once. Then he was unconscious, pure, blissful, painless nothingness. An escape from the burning that was his world. Escape from the family he could no longer face. Hopefully, he thought to himself, I'll die here. Maybe now my luck will turn. This didn't seem to be the case, however, as Draco awoke an unknown time later in the same position on the floor. Any other time, if he had collapsed, his parents would have taken him to his room. He would have awoken with their concerned faces floating above him. Not anymore, not this time, and not ever again. He could hear the far-off voices of his parents. He could see the moonlight drifting across the table, telling him that it had been a few hours at the most that he had laid there. It had felt like so much longer. He managed to sit up, crying out in a cracked, harsh voice. That was not his own. As soon as he made those slight movements, his skin felt as if it was crawling, boiling all over with throbbing pain. The mark on his arm bubbled, almost as if it was enjoying his pain, savoring it. He grimaced when he eventually did manage to sit up, wincing as his joints groaned in protest. His head pounded as he stood shakily, stumbling backwards a few steps before shuddering upright. Since then, he had not spoken to either of his parents, and they had made no attempt to speak with him. All they had exchanged with him were a few glares that would have killed their son on the spot had it been possible. Now Draco stepped stealthily onto the train. He threw his suitcase under the seat of the nearest compartment and moved away to get changed into his robes. Robes early, away from possible prying eyes. The only reason why Draco Lucius Malfoy had even bothered to return was because he had received a special handwritten note telling him that it would be much appreciated if he came back for the final 8th year in order to make up for the one he'd lost in the war. Really, he hadn't made much convincing. It hadn't needed much convincing. His home life wasn't actually exactly great right now, and he supposed it would never be the same again. With Lucius in Azkaban and his mother refusing to send even a single glance at her in her son's direction, Draco figured it was better to return to Hogwarts and face the countless insults that would be thrown at him from the other students, than to stay at his home in solitude and silence. Draco brooded over as he swept back towards his chosen compartment. Lost in his thoughts, he walked straight past it at first. What the hell was that? It's not my cat, so what the hell was at my door? I don't like it. Draco brooded over this as he swept back towards his chosen compartment. Lost in his thoughts, he walked straight past it at first. He was so deep in his own mind. He backtracked a little as soon as he realized it was behind him, and could only just mask his horror as he saw the golden trio inside. Oh, Oh, shit. His thoughts evaporated suddenly as the green-eyed boy he'd watched almost obsessively over the past 8 years laughed, light glinting over the emerald green pools in his eyes. Such stunning eyes. The ruffled bird's nest that was Harry's hair. Potter's hair. Sorry, he didn't say Harry, I said it's Potter. Looked as adorable as ever as he threw his head back in laughter. Wait, what? Draco blanched suddenly. He thought he was over that stupid crush. He could not be gay for Potter, no matter what the evidence told him. And above all else, he could not, under any circumstances, let Potter know how he felt. Draco did what a Malfoy does best. He swallowed his conflicting feelings and pulled the compartment door open in a wild flurry. He almost lost his nerve as the 3 sets of piercing eyes shot in his direction. Almost. Malfoy's never backed down. Instead, he barked some sharp comment and sat down, not even paying attention to whatever the weasel's reply was. He was not too focused on keeping his gaze away from Harry's. He didn't want to speak of what had happened at the battle. He couldn't conjure a single logical explanation for his actions, other than that at the time the only reason he had done it was because it had felt right. As if Potter would understand that. Draco directed his silver-eyed glare out into the corridor, shifting through his thoughts in an attempt to group them into appropriate packages he could actually deal with. Draco could feel eyes on him, just one pair. Harry's eyes. He tensed without really acknowledging it. Just the thought of Harry sent his mind into turmoil. Turned his thoughts to mush. It was outrageous. No one should be able to have such an effect on him. No one deserved that kind of power. It took every shred of Draco's collective willpower to turn his glare to Potter, to reel in his emotion and face what was before him, stony-faced. What do you want, Potter? He tried his best to keep his voice malicious, as much as it pained him to do so. The Slytherin prince's self-control withered as he stared into those twin meadows. Oh, how easy it would be to lose himself within their depths. Then came the words, those words he'd longed to hear since first year from the boy he'd adored. For as long as he could recall, the golden boy wanted to put the past behind them. He wanted a fresh start. Potter, don't you know how much I wanted this? Draco yearned to scream at that stupid sod. He wanted so badly to nod, to agree, to express his intense desire to start afresh. But he couldn't. No matter what, he couldn't subject the blundering idiot to the endless insults they would receive. Even a simple friendship could endanger them all. He wouldn't do that to Potter. As well as this, despite everything, his loyalties still lie with the Malfoys. He couldn't disgrace his family like this. He'd done it enough already. Being homosexual was one thing, but becoming affiliated with the boy who lived, that was treason. Keep up the mask. Don't let it slip. Don't let him see beneath it. Draco fought a small internal battle to keep himself expressionless, though he could tell he hadn't been entirely successful, as Potter's eyes clouded with concern. As if Potter, that could happen, he sneered, internally screaming at himself, hating himself more than ever, as stupid, beautiful Potter's face contorted into an expression of deep hurt and sadness. Draco turned away, wishing right there and then he would die. He would just spontaneously combust on the spot. Anything to stop the guilt that now racked him. He had caused that look of hurt, of sadness, all because of this fucking thing on his arm. His Merlin awful parents, his pathetic excuse of a family, and him, a pathetic excuse for a Malfoy. He sank against the glass of the compartment door, pressing himself as far from Harry as he possibly could, fighting to keep the tears of despair in his eyes. Malfoys don't cry. Hi guys, here's the chapter. I'm not quite sure where this story is going yet, but hopefully that you're enjoying it so far. Please leave your thoughts in the comments, and I'll try to get back to them all. Okay. Chapter 3. Harry's POV. Harry found himself turning to Draco almost periodically as the train shuddered forwards, as if he couldn't help but look at the Malfoy, the man he had hated for so long as he could remember. It didn't make any sense to Harry whatsoever. Sure, he looked at Draco often enough before, but back then he had been looking for suspicious signs. But what was he looking for now? Harry noticed that he had subconsciously turned to Draco again, not even registering it as he traced his eye over the blonde. He was such a mystery, but it didn't seem to Harry that he wanted to be that way. It couldn't be. Why couldn't he just get over their shitty past? Couldn't he see that Harry wanted his friendship? He thought over the expressions he had momentarily seen in Draco's face. Longing, hurt, sadness. Did that mean he'd wanted to say yes? Was he too tired? Was he too tired of this feud between them? As he was tired of it, if he was tired of it, why did he not agree to put the past behind them? Harry sighed to himself as he fought to gather his thoughts. Draco was definitely changed, had definitely changed since the war. That much was obvious. He was thinner for a start, whip-like and fearful. He kept touching his arm, the one with the mark, almost disgustedly, as if the very thought of it being there made him sick. Harry knew he hadn't wanted it. He understood how much Draco had pleaded to be spared from it. The thought made anger rise like fire within himself. Once more, it was his fault Draco had gotten the mark in the first place. Hell, the whole bloody thing was his fault. A lump rose in his throat. Don't break down, not here, not now. Stay strong, he silently willed himself. There was no way he was saddling Ron and Hermione with his stupid feelings, not after all that they'd endured for him. They deserved a new beginning, and they had each other to deal with. He had to let them get on with their lives. He had to let them recover. He could sort through all of it his own. He would be fine. Once more he glanced at Draco. Malfoy looked more muscular than before, his face angular and lean like the rest of him. His eyes as stars, starry like as ever. They shined like silver diamonds. What? He frowned at himself in the window. What the bloody hell was that thought about? Starry-like eyes? Silver diamonds? No, Malfoy's eyes were like ash, boring, dark, and gray. Harry narrowed his own eyes. It was too early for this thought, but he did dwell on them later if he could be bothered. Now he wasn't. He just wanted to sleep. He didn't know exactly how long it took him to slip peacefully into the oblivion of unconsciousness. But once he did, Harry was visited by the nightmares he had come to expect. He really wouldn't have fallen asleep right there in the middle of the day with other people present, but he'd just been so tired. Momentarily lapse in concentration was all it took for him to return to the war again. You might get triggered. Beware. And spoilers ahead. Well, I mean, this whole thing's a spoiler, but there you go. Curses flew over his head and around him from every angle. He was terrified, stuck still, almost watching from another perspective as the cries of pain and loss, anger and despair rang through his ears from all over. His breathing was ragged, shallow, tearing at his smoke-charred lungs. Bodies fell around him, protecting the defenseless, wandless chosen one, for all they were worth. Each one fell, each one crumpled. Ron, Hermione, Neville, Luna, Arthur, Molly. They dropped one by one, lifeless, to the ground, leaving him a pathetic ball of fear, alone on the battlefield, shivering in his hopelessness. He was unable to move, stuck under some spell that rendered him completely immobile. There was nothing he could do. They all died, all of them. He was the only one left. A swarm of blackness drew nearer to him, chanting words he didn't understand, their faces obscured by large hoods. Death Eaters headed by a tall shape with a shaven head, his eyes that were like slits in his skin, pupils that were simply lines, if an impenetrable dark, impenetrable black, the eyes of a snake. Voldemort growing closer and closer to him, while Harry was stuck, unable to move, unable to run, unable to react. Voldemort stood above him, eyes red and boring straight through Harry's skull. In his hand he held the Elder Wand. A slim line slim line of bone that felt the Dark Lord's hand comfortably. He grinned, teeth like razors, like inhuman. Yep. Yeah. It said it's on. It's hot. It's like Satan sat on our house and was like, ha ha. I will get you, Harry Potter. The words were hissed in parcel tongue, withering like a snake through the air, towards Harry. Then the Dark Lord raised his wand, a screaming green light bursting forth from its tip, flying straight towards Harry, aiming straight at his chest. Harry jolted back into consciousness, eyes wide like with alarm, the cries of the dead ringing in his ears. He realized that where he was and sank his head into his hands, feigning rubbing sleep from his eyes to give himself a moment to calm down. Ron, Hermione, and Draco were staring at him, confusion on their faces. Draco quickly averted his eyes, seemingly finding intense interest in the corridor once more. "Are you all right, mate?" Ron asked, worry evident in his narrow eyes. His expression mirrored Hermione's beside him. My mom won't stop talking. I'm going to punch her. "Yeah, fine. Just fell asleep." Harry stretched, yawning, keeping up the act as well as he could, his heart hammering against his ribs, threatening to break loose. It was painful in the whole other way. How easily that lie left his lips. Ron nodded, offering a small smile, before resting his head on Hermione's shoulder again. Harry wasn't fine. Not in the slightest. Panic seized him, but he fought it down, refusing to show it here. Small things like the feeling of the seat behind him, his robes beneath his palms, acted as a means of calming him down. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. He wouldn't be falling asleep again, that was for sure. He looked up again, seeing Draco glance at him and blush, a blush rising on his pale face. What was his problem? Harry turned back to the window, still breathing slowly and deeply. Not long to go now. He could do this. He just had to ground himself. Eventually the train stopped, coming to a halt at a near deserted station. Harry caught sight of Hagrid from the window, standing stoic and proud with his lantern being held high before him. He remembered it had been what it had been like, seeing the huge man for the first time. He smiled, and the memories flitted across his mind. He was brought back by Ron telling him to get a move on, and quickly rose to grab his things. His friends just exited the compartment, probably going to get a carriage. Behind him there was a thud, then the sound of papers scattering on the floor. "Shit," it whispered. But clear to Harry's ears. The chosen one turned. What? I think she's calling my dad. Oh my gosh. Hold on. Okay, I fixed the problem. My mom was just talking. The chosen one turned with a start, eyes wide with panic. He quickly realized that it was only Malfoy. He dropped his suitcase and it had sprung open. The dark-haired man didn't really think about it. He just started helping the blonde pick up the scattered objects. Again, he saw the rush of crimson in the man's cheeks, the dilation in his wide mercury eyes. Mom! Mom! You're not deaf! Turn down the volume! Mom, you're not deaf! Turn down the volume! I can hear it from here! Oh, gosh. The dilation in his wide mercury eyes. Why was he so flustered? As Harry placed the final piece of parchment back into the leather suitcase, he was surprised to hear Malfoy speak. "Thanks, Potter," came the quiet voice, holding only a trace of his usual venom. "Don't mention it, Malfoy," Harry answered, smirking as the other man almost ran from the compartment. Case clutched to his side. Harry retrieved his luggage and left the train. He walked towards the carriages quickly as the last students took their seats. The Thestrals stood as proudly as ever, snorting and stomping their hooves impatiently. Harry realized with a deep sense of sadness that many of the students here would now be able to see the creatures. So many of them have seen death. He grimaced and banished the thoughts from his mind, and climbed into the carriage with Ron and Hermione. Neville sat across from them with his toad. Luna was staring out across the lake from the window in her own world. It appeared. It almost seemed like he was back in first year again, going to the castle for the first time ever. Almost. They had small talk on the way to the castle, discussing holidays and memories, how it felt to be back after they had all thought they were done with Hogwarts. Harry had to admit it felt great to talk to them all again, to laugh like old times. He found himself greatly enjoying their company, and relaxed almost completely as the carriage trundled towards the towering, overshadowed outline of the castle. He listened intently as Neville told a story about how he discovered a new species of plant in a nature walk over the summer. Grinning at his friends, explained how he'd only found it after sliding down a hill. The whole carriage burst out laughing at that, adding on their own summer anecdotes after Neville had finished. They took turns giving brief descriptions of what surprising things had happened to them throughout the long months after the war. When it came to Harry's turn, he was hesitant on what to say. "It's not like I can just bring up these stupid nightmares," he thought wearily. Instead, he began a tale of what had been happening at Grimmauld Place. He, Sirius, and Remus were working to rid the dank old house of centuries of dark magic. A feat much easier said than done. Harry laughed as he explained how the house seemed to be fighting back. Cursed objects that had been removed kept reappearing within its countless rooms. No matter how many times they had been discarded and disposed of, Harry dodged around the subject of how he was feeling. After everything that had happened, he stubbornly refused to throw his troubles at his friends. Never better, honestly. I'm just glad it's all over. The last part was truthful, at least. The four nodded, replying with compliments like, "Same here, mate," and "Me too," before launching back into their excited talk. It seemed like him had put the war behind them, pushing their grasping claws out of their thoughts. Or attempted to, in his case. I wish I found it that easy. None of them seemed to be bothered by it. They've all moved on. Why can't I? Harry zoned out, the same thought repeating again and again in his mind, accompanied by snapshot images of that dreadful day. Will it ever leave me alone? The author's note pretty much is the same. And there's an ad. Go away ad. Okay, and the ad should go away now. Yay! Okay, here we go. Okay, author's note. We just passed 50 reads on September 29th, 2017. Thank you so much, guys. This really means a lot to me. Thank you all for reading this book. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. I didn't really think I would get 10 reads, and when I checked a few hours ago, it was only at 31. Oh, that's cool. I'm so happy. Edit. 1K reads. 1K. In less than a month of November 26, 2017, over 900 reads. Thank you all so much. Oh, that's sweet of the author. Chapter 4. Do we have time? Yes, we do. Chapter 4. Draco's POV. He ran up from the compartment as his face burning with embarrassment, just as it had been for the past half hour. Or more accurately, since it had been since Potter had stretched, showing the tan-toned body that had been previously hidden beneath his robes. Merlin, he's freaking hot. See, this is what I'm used to. This type of stuff. Not this bullshit that... No. I'm going to torture myself and read the rest of that because a lot of you are going to like it, apparently. Draco felt like he'd been kicked back in time to when he'd first realized he was into boys. When he'd first found the bloody golden boy attractive. He wished Potter, with his stupid smirk and tousled hair, his freaking gorgeous metal green eyes, and sculpted features, just wasn't quite so perfect. The Slytherins pulled himself aside into one of the last carriages, into the procession. He was alone, thank Merlin. Draco turned to the door and slammed it shut. Something you weren't supposed to do unless the carriage was full. He needed this time to be alone, to think in the silence, and prepare himself for what was sure to be a less than warm welcome back to Hogwarts. Since he was alone, Draco dropped his usual straight posture, and the mask he kept firmly attached to his face, discarded for later use. He slumped down onto one of the seats, laying with his face to the ceiling, his eyebrows scrunched together. It just had to be effing Potter. Any other bloke would have been better. Anyone. He groaned, pressing the heels of his palms into his eyes. He had been over this crush. It hadn't bothered him for almost 2 months, longer than ever before, since it just popped into existence at some point in second or third year. He'd been almost certain it had finally passed after 4 long, grueling years of it non-stop torture. He snorted. Of course not. He wasn't lucky enough for miracles like that. Don't tell me there's another wasp in this house. Do you know where it is, Kat? Because Kat's looking in the direction I heard it from. Okay. Ever since the rejected handshake all that time ago, back in first year, Draco had been almost obsessed with the stupid git. The unsuccessful friendship could have been the catalyst for the huge change in his life. Had it went different, maybe he wouldn't have become a Death Eater. Maybe he wouldn't have had such faith in the ways of his family for so long. Maybe he wouldn't be in this situation now, conflicted between 2 opposing sides. The aristocrat glared at the ceiling of the carriage. If he could melt it with his eyes. It all just wasn't fair. He never asked to be born into a family who had sided with the Dark Lord. He never asked to be tortured and beaten into submission. He'd also never asked to find a fucker like Potter attractive. He thought back to what Potter had said in the train. Let's put this all behind us. Merlin Potter, that's all I've wanted since forever. He'd wanted to scream at the man, punch him in his stupidity, kiss that idiotic face, run his hands through that tousled mop that topped his head, all at the same time. But he couldn't. It wasn't fair. No one deserved to be handed the horrors of the Malfoy bloodline. Draco didn't deserve happiness. He was too broken by the war, too weak for anyone like Potter to love. Besides, Potter wasn't gay. Stupid bloody Potter, he muttered to himself. Draco lay there for a time, eyes closed, just mulling over his thoughts and preparing himself for the roaring background of the great hall. He only sat up when the carriage drew to a halt, and the click and whine of multiple doors opening met his ears. Malfoy stood, brushing the creases from his robes, adjusting his collar, and expertly gelled back hair. Like fixing it, I guess. He flung the door open with all the swagger of his heritage, and stepped nimbly down the stairs. Already his mask had slid up onto his face, and a sneer that already dared those around him to provoke him. The castle had been rebuilt since the battle. Any signs of damage were hidden from view. The worst pieces reconstructed. The worst pieces reconstructed. There were scars that detailed where the battle had taken place, and Draco surveyed the few he could see. Images flew through his mind. Signs of the war lay around him in the faded scorch marks and even uneven surface of the ground. Most of them could have been passed off as runaway magic from students testing to learn, but those who had been there that day knew different. Draco didn't want to think about the day of the war. but it seemed his mind couldn't help but wander. He couldn't think about these things. Just know they could make him lose his signature Malfoy cool. And that was something he could not allow. He joined the procession and made his way into the Great Hall, looking his usual seat between Pansy and Blaise and Pansy, facing the other tables. "Took your time," smirked Blaise as Draco sat down. "Oh, I'm sorry, Blaise. I didn't realize you missed me so." I'm sorry, Blaise. I didn't realize you missed me so," Draco sneered, rolling his eyes at his friends. He'd known Blaise for years, long before the first year of Hogwarts. They were childhood friends, as were he and Pansy. Speaking of Pansy, she's been incredibly, uncharacteristically silent since Draco had taken a seat. He glanced her way to see the women gazing almost longingly at the Gryffindor table at Hermione. "Merlin's sake, Pansy, stop drooling over bloody Granger, bloody Granger," Draco said quietly at her, laughing delightfully as she turned towards him and a panicked expression on her face. Pansy had recently began crushing on Granger, despite the fact that she was taken by the weasel. She rolled her eyes. "Fuck off, Draco," she spat, a smile tracing her lips as she turned back toward their table. She was silent for a second, then suddenly seemed to regain her composure. "Look, you can talk anyway. How long has it been since the golden boy has first caught your eye?" Pansy grinned evilly at his embarrassment. Crimson crept across his pale cheeks. "Oh, bugger off, Pansy!" Draco scowled. This was not a laughing matter. Parkinson chuckled anyway, finding joy in his discomfort. She leaned towards them again. "Did you hear who they've got teaching potions?" she asked with a grin. Of course, Pansy would have the latest gossip, but how much of whatever she had to say would be true? "Yes, Pansy, we've been here for all 5 minutes, but sure, we know who the new teachers are," Blaise said sarcastically, his eyes glinting with curiosity despite himself. Unlike Draco, Blaise seemed unable to conceal his feelings, at least not in his eyes, anyway. Blaise's eyes were almost full of emotion, even when his face was set in stone. Pansy paid him no heed, carrying on as if he'd never spoken in the first place. "There's rumors. Apparently she's been to Azkaban." Azkaban? There's no D. There's also Azkaban. Sorry. She positively beamed ecstatic to have uncovered such a priceless piece of information. A teacher? An ex-Azkaban teacher? Surely not. McGonagall wouldn't allow it. Would she? I mean, if she's becoming Dumbledore, we already know Dumbledore has some questionable hiring practices, but hopefully she's not like that. Draco felt a flare of panic in his chest. What if he knew them? It was possible that they were a Death Eater if they had been in Azkaban. Shove off, Pansy. As if she'd be allowed to teach after being in Azkaban. He scoffed incredulously. Pansy opened her mouth to answer when a sudden hush settled over the hall. The sorting was about to begin. By the end of the sorting, Slytherin had gained a few new members. Draco noted with a kind of relief relieved sadness that there were no longer empty seats at any of the tables where those who had died in the war had sat. He decided not to dwell on the subject. As expected, the chatter rose to a crescendo in the hall as the last students took their seats and looked about excitedly, the first years wondering what magical things could possibly take place next. Draco grinned at their ignorance. They never seemed to anticipate the grandeur of the feast. The Slytherin only half listened as a hush once more settled like a thick blanket over the hall. And Professor. No, she was headmistress now. McGonagall began to speak. He picked out a few key details as she spoke, but most of it was the same as always, and directed mostly towards the new first years. Draco listened intently, however, to the small piece of information she gave to the 8th years. This year, due to the terrible misfortunes of the last, which I'm sure you are all quite aware of, we have invited the previous 7th years back for 8th year. They will be acting as normal students and will not be excused from any of the usual school activities. Her eyes flickered almost unnoticeably towards the golden trio. These 8th years will not be staying in the usual given house dorms in order to prevent the occurrence of overcrowding issues, but rather than a separate place of the castle, 8th years I will lead you to this place after the feast. She paused again, probably to allow her words to sink in. Draco's curiosity was now piqued. He began to pay more attention. Have I read this before? Because this happened in another one. But he shook his hand or something. Yeah, but that was, they had cool haircuts, and they don't have cool haircuts in this one. I remember that. I was like, what weird haircuts do they have now? Draco's curiosity was now piqued. Yeah. There were usually 6 to 8 students per dorm, so the chances of being paired with Potter were decidedly low. Since when did anything ever go in my favor, though? The headmistress ended her speech. And now, I won't keep you... What the hell is that? Oh. Nothing too important. Okay. Cat, Emmy, are you sleeping? Oh, I guess not. She heard something. Since when did anything go in his favor, though? Oh, we already read that. To the feast, she said, voice rising slightly in volume at the end. All across the hall, gasps in awe and surprise sounded from the first years, mingled with the laughter and cheering of everyone else. Food disappeared suddenly on the table, a banquet unmatched by anything Draco's father could have conjured at his exquisite parties. Draco glanced up once the Gryffindor table, locking eyes momentarily with Potter before quickly averting his gaze. He refused to think about the insufferable Git just now. He sighed. His plate was as he piled it with many delicious delicacies. There we go. On the table. Malfoys do not get flustered by insolent Gryffindors. I might change the story to first-person POV. From now on, I haven't decided yet. Please leave votes and comments. Okay. I can go another chapter, right? Yeah. Chapter 5. Okay, I decided to try first person. Please let me know if you prefer third, and if there are any mistakes. Harry's POV. As we walked into the school, I fought to control myself. The sight of the place where so many have fallen at the hands of the Death Eaters and Voldemort filled me with a rising sense of panic. I didn't think it would affect me as much as it did, but I found myself short of breath in my agitation. Images flashed through my mind, each bringing with them an avalanche of feelings so heavy I couldn't breathe. My eyes widened, and everything around me seemed dim, tarnished by the war that once again raged in all directions. I forced my head up, locked onto small, minute details near the ground, my suitcase in my hands. Although it took my mind off the raging flood coursing through my brain, my friends had noticed. Of course, they had, and had questioned me on it. But of course, I said I'd be fine and began to focus on the intricate designs adjoined the path that we walked along. Adorning the path that we walked along, looking anywhere but the scorch marks I could see out of the corners of my eyes. I'd never been happier to enter the Great Hall. I found myself paying more attention than ever before during the headmistress's speech. Usually I zoned out after the first few minutes, but this time was different due to what was being said. I noticed that Headmistress McGonagall skipped from the subject of the war, which I was thankful for. There was no way I wanted to be reminded of that fucking battlefield any more than I already was. Plus, the new first years didn't need to know the details. When she had spoken about the new arrangements for 8th years, I was intrigued. It seemed odd that they would put us somewhere different, but I suppose it was to stop overcrowding or something. I hadn't really thought on it for too long. Now, however, as we filed out of the Great Hall, following the headmistress, it was all that I could think about. I wonder who I would be in a dorm with. How many people, whether I'd know any of them or not. It was exciting and slightly terrifying all at once. The headmistress eventually stopped in front of the portrait I'd never seen before near the Gryffindor Tower. Judging by the looks of the confusion from the other students clustered around me, they'd never noticed it either. The portrait showed a stormy swept field, with lightning dancing over the dark trees in the background. In the forefront was a man with piercing light brown eyes. He wore a creaseless suit and sat straight, as if he'd been called to attention. A muggle pipe sat on his lips, which was strange since he was surely a wizard. He watched us all without a word, one eyebrow raised. His left hand stroked the stubble adorning his chin. He looked as if he was deep in thought. The professor spoke the word loudly, obviously ensuring that all of us could hear. Lupus. Hermione helpfully informed that it meant wolf in Latin, as well, Lupin. If you think about it, his Remus Lupin, he's a werewolf. Lupus, yeah. As the portrait swung open and we entered the room, when we finally saw the inside, I couldn't believe the sheer size of the place. The common room was a large rectangular shape, decorated with mixtures of 4 house colors. Its center sat a pile of assorted beanbags and couches. There were polished mahogany tables around these seats, etched with house symbols. Okay then, so they hadn't forced us to completely abandon our houses. The sides were lined with fully stocked bookcases, bookcases and desks for a more private studying area. I loved it already. It felt cozy, like the burrow in a way, but more spread out. I watched eagerly as everyone spread around the room. Wait, I thought it was Draco's point of view. No, it's Harry's. Okay. Okay, then that's why he said Gryffindor. Okay. And burrow in a way, but more spread out. I watched eagerly as everyone spread around the room, checking out the various alcoves around the place. Doors dotted its sides and end at intervals. Students, I have the list of who will be sharing a dorm for. Oh, you signed it. Oh, she pulled a piece of parchment from her pocket in her robes. As the rooms are considerably small, only 2 of the or 3 students will be sharing at a time. When you hear your name, please go to your all-located dorm. You will find your luggage inside, McGonagall said, adjusting her glasses on her nose. She began reading out names, a room at a time, indicating what door each student was to go through. The group grew smaller and smaller until there was only a few of us left. Ron had been paired up with Dean and Seamus. Hermione had been placed with Parvati and Pansy. I wondered who would be paired up with me, and when McGonagall read out my name, I hadn't even looked, but I realized that there was only one other male still here. Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy, she indicated. She indicated a room near the end of the long room. Was it just me, or did she just smirk as she read our names? She's turning into Dumbledore. Him shipping everyone and having really bad practices of hiring people. Smirked as she read our names. Finally, I thought. Now I had a chance to end this stupid rivalry between us. Malfoy would have no choice now. He'd have to speak to me. There you go. I started towards our room, entered through the dark wooden door. The door knob was cold. My hand was, as I turned it, the door opened inwards, releasing the delicious scent of vanilla. The room was decorated plainly with Gryffindor and Slytherin colors, occasionally even mixed them together. I wrinkled my nose at that. two four-poster bedroom beds. Post-bedroom beds. Not poster. Two post beds. 4-post beds. Sat at the right-hand side. A long rectangular mirror with a ledge between them. One of the beds, obviously Malfoy's, had a green duvet and pillows with silver lining. I snorted. Typical Slytherins. They just had to go over the top with detail. The other bed had a plain red duvet that was much better. I made my way around the room, entering the small bathroom, complete with the shower, sink, and toilet. I caught sight of my shockingly green eyes and ruffled hair as I turned back out. He was standing there by the door, Malfoy. I remember suddenly that I didn't want to keep being mean to him and tried to hide the scowl that seemed to automatically take over my features. Malfoy looked as if he would rather be thrown away off the astronomy tower than stand here. He shot me a withering look. "Come on, Malfoy. Let's end this bloody thing," I said to him. I hoped he realized I wasn't going to let this go. What? There was no way I was going to keep up this fight between us. And one way or another, he'd have to tolerate me. Fuck up. What? Fuck up. Scarface. He sneered, shooting me a glare as he went over to his bed to unpack. Whatever had been wrong with him on the train seemed to be long gone now. The look of despair had been replaced with his usual "don't mess with me" expression that I'd come to associate with Malfoy's. "Merlin Malfoy, what's your problem?" I kept my voice level. I didn't want to provoke him if he wanted to fight. I wasn't going to rise to it. Then again, talking was better than nothing. "Have a bloody guess, Potter. I have to share a room with the likes of you. Why the hell would I be happy about that?" He snorted, his eyes flashing dangerously, as he threw up his suitcase and began to pack. Threw open, sorry. Why did I say throw up? I felt hurt for a second, then remembered who I was speaking to. I turned away from him. Then there weren't many ways I could respond to that. I didn't have any idea why he refused my friendship. Then I remembered how. I decided the same back in first year. Surely he wasn't still sour about that. It wasn't, 7 years ago? It was, 7 years ago today? Not even a sod like him would hold a grudge for that long. I was almost certain of it. I moved to my case and began unpacking, too. There was more room in here compared to the usual dorms, but I could understand why there weren't as many people per room here. It was nice to have some silence for once. I glanced up at my new roommate once as I lifted books and clothes from my case. His hands shook silently as he moved them. I wondered about that as I finished with my case and slid it beneath the bed. Why would his hands be shaking? Was something wrong? Wait a minute. I'm worried about Malfoy? I berated myself and kicked the thought away. No, I wasn't worried about Malfoy. I was checking on my roommate, who to be a Malfoy that was completely different. I had the sudden feeling of eyes on me and looked up. Malfoy locked his gaze with mine for a heartbeat. His face slowly hardened, then dropped back to his almost emptied case. I decided not to dwell on that. He had looked so helpless in that 1 second, so broken, like he had on the train. I moved away from my bed and towards the door, leaving him alone. The common room was packed, but that was to be expected. Everyone was sitting in a cluster, chatting amongst themselves. There weren't really any distinct groups, and I could pick out. But I noticed Ron and Hermione sitting on the beanbag chairs, talking to a Hufflepuff girl I'd never seen before. She had long black hair and electric blue eyes. Her face was angular, and she was wearing dark blue eyeliner. I felt like I recognized her the more I tried to remember, but I couldn't place her name. I walked over and sat down next to Ron on a red beanbag. "How'd you like your room?" I asked him, smirking. "Don't even get me started, mate. Just my luck. To be put with those two bloody lovebirds." He indicated Dean and Seamus holding hands, and they spoke to a Ravenclaw on one of the couches. "Who'd you end up with?" he asked, turning away from the couches. "Malfoy," I groaned. Ron laughed. "Should have expected that, really?" Harry, he smirked at the glower. "Bloody Malfoy. That's karma for pulling that stunt on the train." He paused. "Why'd you do it anyway? You really want to be friendly with that moron?" "I'm tired of us being at each other's throats all the time," I stated. I just can't believe I can't be bothered with him. To be honest. I mean, he's a Malfoy for Merlin's sake. Jeez. Merlin's sake. It's in their bloody blood to be gits. Ron shot a look at the blonde as he emerged from our room. "Don't argue with that." "I can't argue with that," I chuckled. I turned to Hermione, who'd been locked in a deep conversation with the Hufflepuff. She glanced my way as I turned to her and smiled. "Oh, Harry, this is Juniper," she said, grinning at the girl next to her. "She looks familiar." "Hi, it's nice to meet you," she beamed, holding out her hand. Why do I feel like it's Bellatrix in disguise? Like she just down-aged herself. Oh, damn it. Where'd it go? My headphones dropped. She beamed, holding out her hand for me to shake. I took it, grinning at her. Bless you, kitty. She beamed, holding out her hand for me to shake. I took it, grinning at her, as she turned back to Hermione once more. I couldn't place where I have seen her before, but something about her. It's just something about her. I think he's talking about the portrait of Bellatrix Lestrange, which was on the black portrait, if you remember. I think it's Bellatrix Lestrange. Who else wants to put the bet on that? Mate, you still there? I snapped back to the present at the sound of Ron's voice. Sorry, what? I stuttered, blinking a few times to reorient myself. He launched into a conversation about who he thought the new teachers would be. I listened as he spoke and took over halfway through with my own theories. He must have stayed in the common room, chatting with each other and our friends. For a long time, I barely even remembered going back to my room. I was so tired. All I know is I woke up to the sound of screaming. Oh, Okay. Chapter 6. Draco's POV. Of course I had to end up sharing a room with bloody Potter. I didn't know why I'd expect any otherwise. I ignored him as best I could in the short time it took me to neatly pack and fold my clothes away and walk into the common room. I waited for a few minutes after he left to follow him out. I liked these new dorms. They were more spacious than the previous ones, neater and more flexible. Although, in my opinion at least, they were a little too warm for what I had grown accustomed to. I'd like the coolness of the dungeons, even if it was quite unwanted in the colder months. The fireplaces were a welcome change, however. I no longer had to sit and shiver before the measly green fires of the Slytherin common room. You weren't forced to sit squished up together on the couch anymore. No, now we had the leisure of beanbags. A beanbag was something I was unfamiliar with. I'd never encountered such an object before in my life. It was such an odd idea, the bag of fabric filled with hard balls. I'll admit, it didn't sound too appealing. However, when I actually sat on it, next to Pansy and Blaze, I found it to be quite relaxing. It did prove to be very difficult to look elegant on a beanbag. I gave up trying after a short time and relaxed backwards into it. Enjoy the comfortable feel of it beneath me and chatted quietly with Blaze and Pansy. I spotted Potter and his little group at the other side of the common room, speaking with a Hufflepuff girl I hadn't seen before. Many people seemed to be talking with those of other houses. Ravenclaws were locked in deep conversation with Hufflepuffs, Gryffindors chiming in at random times, being their annoying selves, no doubt. Even a few Slytherins were snuggled up on the couch with other house members. This was very tranquil. There was a very tranquil feeling to this place, as it filled with murmuring conversations quickly rising in pitch. I'd never really thought about how many inter-house romances and friendships there must be. It was unnerving to see everyone interacting, to say the least. Then again, change is good. Games began as the night dragged on. The little groups that had been dotted around the large room started up spontaneous matches of Scrabble and Wizard's Chess. I'd never come across the enchanted Scrabble board before, so I wasn't all that sure what to expect as I joined into a game. One of the mud. No, I'm done with that. It's just a reminder of my ludicrous father. Muggleborns had brought the set along with them. Surprisingly, it was a Hufflepuff, not a Ravenclaw, so as I would have first guessed. They were clustered around a table depicting all the four house symbols merged together in the multicolored shield. Fitting, really, since all four houses were at the table. Potter and his little following had decided to breeze over and grace us with their presence. Oh, goody, I shot them a glare as they made themselves comfortable. They were plenty of other games, albeit more crowded than this one. I'm sure they could have joined in somewhere else. I forced myself not to focus on Potter for too long. Bloody Potter. I'd never be free of him, would I? All I wanted was a nice, relaxing game, and instead I'm sitting here, facing the stupid prick. He smirked at me. Smirked? His eyes were very green in this light. Glinting gemstones, shimmering with the most beautiful glitter. Stop it. I chided myself. Flickering my gaze away from Potter and back to the board. I watched as Blaze took his turn, adding the word potion to pinnacle. I didn't really take part. Just watched from the sidelines, teaching myself how to play. The words appeared of their own accord, and swirled their position as words were spoken. The little pictures dotting the board moved and laughed at our failures. I had more fun than I would have thought just watching, helping the players as their numbers dwindled until there were 2 left.
You need to get out of the way.
Emerald, come here. You calling yourself old? Not that old, Mom.
I feel old right now.
If you feel old, Dad's almost 60. How do you think that?
No, your dad is...
He's turning 60 this year.
Yeah.
Yikes. But, how the hell can he look so good? Okay. Busy laughing till there was 2 left. By now, I was too busy laughing to really pay attention. I felt my gaze once more drawn to Potter. He looked stunning as he laughed. His burden-est hair bounced with each movement. How is that even possible? How the hell can he look so good all the time? Did he even try? It sure as hell didn't look like it. He just somehow managed to look perfect at all times. At some point earlier on, drinks had been handed around. Their origin were suspicious, but according to the shady Hufflepuff who had passed them around in little plastic enchanted cauldrons, there was only a low alcohol content. It was a Okay, that was weird. Anyways, low alcohol content. It was a bright orange colored liquid, smelling of a mixture of almond and mint. I raised the miniature cauldron to my lips and was surprised by the cool, frothy texture. The drinks that had been finished before long. Everything was slightly blurred after a while, which led me to suspect that there was a higher alcohol content in those drinks than had been let on. Frankly, I didn't really care. My worries had been numbed. I existed in a state of borderline reality. Everything was tinged a light blue. I remember stumbling into my room at some point, possibly around 12:30. There were still quite a few 8th years in the common room, including Potter and his group. I knew better than to stay up too long, even in my delirious state of mind. I stumbled into my silken black night clothes and fallen into a heap onto my bed. I was asleep within a minute. I stood still, frozen to the spot as my cloak and my hair whipped around in the wind. This is his dream. I was at the top of the astronomy tower, standing a little way back from the railing. Oh, this is when Dumbledore was killed. Dumbledore stood before me, calm and placid, stroking his beard in quiet contemplation. Why are you going in and out? You're the one that's ruining it. Gosh. Quiet contemplation. He wasn't speaking, not even attempting to utter a word. The silence was deafening. My blood roared in my ear, every nerve screaming in mourning. I knew something was going to happen, but I didn't know what. I was apart from my body, as in third-person view. It was very strange to see myself standing there when I looked down. I didn't have my wand. I was defenseless. Whatever happened, I have no idea of deflecting curses that flew at me. I would have no way of deflecting curses at me that flew at me. I turned to the right, making the shape out of my aunt Bellatrix in the gloom, surrounded by a small pack of hooded Death Eaters. Fenrir Greyback stood among them. Of course he did. Each of them looked murderous, their eyes glinting with malice intent. I turned back to face Dumbledore. Only my old headmaster was nowhere to be seen. Now Voldemort stood before me, a near translucent skin illuminated by the crescent moon behind him. I felt my heart hammer in my chest at what must have been a thousand beats per second as he fixed me with his cold, calculative stare. His hands trembled at my side. "You are a failure, Draco Malfoy. If you cannot perform simple tasks such as this, you are of no use to us," he hissed, blazing eyes shining with malevolence. There we go. I was completely immobilized, too terrified to move. I heard the faint click, click, click of my aunt's shoes as she moved around me, the other Death Eaters in tow. I couldn't do it. Please, I stuttered. I knew what was going to happen. Suddenly the scene changed. We were now standing in the Malfoy Manor. Voldemort was still standing before me, but now I was encircled by Death Eaters. My aunt grinned from her place at the Dark Lord's side. My father stood on his other side. He looked worn out, beaten. The expression on his face sent a spear straight through my heart, even though I didn't care for him anymore. He looks disappointed. I couldn't stand that look from the man. I strived to please for 16 years. The man I'd never been able to make proud of me, no matter what I'd done to please him. A silence had settled over the circle now. Then Lucius spoke. "You have brought dishonor upon your family, Draco. You seem to want nothing but to hurt us, to make your family shameful. in the eyes of the Dark Lord. I will not tolerate it any longer. Crucio. The entire circle screamed the curse, firing all at once upon me. Instantly, I was back in my own body, seeing it all from my own eyes. Then the pain hit. I had thought one crucio was bad, but multiple at once was unbearable. Pain shot through me. I was a practice dummy for firing range, torn apart from gunshots that I had seen in Muggle movies. I saw red before my eyes. I screamed louder than ever before, convulsing on the ground like a dying animal. All the while, the Dark Lord looked at me, his laughter mixing with that of the Death Eaters as I lay on the floor before them, drowning in a pool of my own blood. Draco! I woke suddenly, shooting up in bed and throwing myself from the covers, legs over the side. I was drenched in sweat, shaking from head to toe. My face was wet. I must have been crying. My skin felt paper thin and raw, even though I hadn't actually just been hit by the curses. I felt a warm hand on my shoulder, and I looked up with a start. Potter stood above me, his eyes glistening with concern. You okay, Malfoy? He asked. His forehead creased in worry as I released a shuddering breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I'm fine, I said quickly back. I cursed me for stuttering. Curse me for hearing my screams. Curse him for looking so cute with his ruffled hair and bare chest. Curse him for not wearing a pajama top. Stupid Potter, couldn't he stop being so adorable for 1 second? Stop being so perfect. I realized I was staring at him, taking in each muscle on his tanned body, tracing my eyes over his various scars. I wanted to place my hand on his chest and heat myself up. No, you can't do that. I couldn't do that to my family. Even after it all. I couldn't fall for the enemy. That was outright shameful. Are you sure? He asked, his other hand on my other shoulder. Now, Merlin, he was so close. I could stand up and kiss him, wrap my arms around his neck. I would feel better after that. He didn't even need to return the gesture. No, stop it. I said I'm fine, Potter. I forced my voice to be strong, venomous, even as my heart shuddered at the sight of the hurt on his face. I couldn't take it. I stood abruptly, inches from Potter, and swept into the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. I leaned over the sink, breathing heavily, as images of the dream flashed through my like jagged rips in reality through my brain. I wasn't fine. I was holding together the cracks in my life. Without success, I was breaking apart, fragmenting before my own eyes. Malfoys are strong. Malfoys don't break under pressure. Malfoys emerge stronger than ever. Maybe I'm not a Malfoy. The thought sent a chill through me. I was nothing if I wasn't a Malfoy. The only thing I was given any recognition was because I carried that ton weight of a name. Without it, I was just Draco. Draco the failure, Draco the disgrace, Draco the unwanted. My name was all I had. I was the only thing that was still natural in this new world that had been flung upon me after the war. I dried my face off with a towel and slipped back into my room. Potter still stood there. Of course he did. Fucking Potter. I wanted right then and there to tell him everything. I looked so open, he looked so open, so accepting as he glanced at me from the corner of his eye. I could just pour my soul out before him, and he wouldn't judge me. Why? Because he's the golden boy? Fearless hero of the wizarding world? Savior of the killing curse? The boy who lived? He was brave and strong and loved and appreciated by his friends. Lucky sod. And I realized he just saved me. I was going to die there in my head. He'd saved me from myself. Bloody Potter, always saving the day. I couldn't bring myself to growl at him or sneer or do any of the many things I wished to. Instead, I uttered the words I never expected to say. Thanks, Potter. He looked confused as I said them, as if he expected something more, or maybe because it wasn't what he had expected at all. Possibly both. He went to say something and thought better of it. He just nodded my way and made his way back to his bed and as I re-entered mine. It was cold now. As I pulled the covers up, I knew I wouldn't be able to get back to sleep now. There was no way I was risking another nightmare with Potter. No nearby. Instead, I sat and thought and attempting to get a grip on my feelings and surprisingly endless chain of problems that it was going to be a long night. Okay, guys, oh crap, I went over 2 hours. Darn it. Oh well. Whoops. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you give this a big thumbs up. Next one's gonna be the Drarry story, and we're halfway through that, kind of. I don't know. No, we're not even halfway. I remember we have like over 36 parts, and I'm not even on like number 9. So, thank you guys for watching. Give this video a big thumbs up and comment down below. What do you think about this story? Or do you have it? Oh, crap. I've been up all day. I don't understand it. Okay. Give it a big thumbs up. Comment down below what you think about this series. And do you think it's going to be a good one? I mean, it's going to be... it's going to help me with no smut in this one, but extra smut in the other one. So, it's going to help me. I wonder if it's going to help you. Thank you guys for watching. Be happy, be healthy, and always be loving. Comment down below. What the frig am I saying? Give it a big thumbs up if you haven't yet. Subscribe and put on push notifications. And I love you guys so much. Bye-bye.